To introduce myself briefly, my name is Olaf Carlson. I'm the founder and managing member of the largest actively managed fund in the world, which invests exclusively in digital assets. So we hold equity only in protocols and not in any companies. So beginning with that, I really want to address this idea of just why are digital assets useful? Like why are, especially this idea of tokenization, where you add a thin digital asset or incentive layer to an existing application, and why is that a useful concept, and what is that leading to in the longer term? So I want to start with a simple question, which is how do you build the largest computing cluster in the world? And the more traditional way you might think about this question is that you should go get a bunch of money from a bunch of people and go make deals with companies who can produce these compute clusters, and then you should basically deploy all these and start your computing cloud that will be as large as Google or something has a computing cloud. But the different answer here is that you should just write a white paper which provides very precise incentives. In this case, I'm talking about the Bitcoin white paper, to create this compute cluster. And by simply pushing out this white paper and piece of code out into the world, you can sort of spontaneously and instantly see a massive self-organization of tens of thousands of people all around the world actually create that compute cluster sort of spontaneously. And so this is what I'm kind of calling swarm intelligence. I don't know if that's a good word, but to me, it's that you're creating a very clear and well-defined incentive structure for thousands of people around the world. And because of that extremely well-defined incentive structure, they're actually self-organizing. So instead of this top-down hierarchical way of creating social interaction, which is through a set of rules or a set of enforcers or a centralized capital source, you can actually just specify the rules of a very precise system and watch it organize itself. And so people that are defining right now many of these decentralized protocols, things like Bitcoin, things like Ethereum, Filecoin, MeshNet coin, all these types of things coming out, they're really defining extremely precise incentive structures which actually lead to human systems. So when these white papers come out, you're creating economic incentives for individual people to take very precise actions. And it would be inconceivable to create the Bitcoin network in a top-down hierarchical fashion. But because it's fully global and sort of open source, open access, it can sort of spontaneously create itself and work well. OK, now with that said, I want to shift gears into what I would call the first business model of the internet. OK, and I will loop this back to this idea of tokenization. So the first really successful business model of the internet that we've seen play out over the last 15 years has been to build a platform, own that platform, seed it with users, and then monetize or extract value from interactions between these users. So this is every major web platform we use today. This includes Facebook, Etsy, eBay, Airbnb, Uber. Every one of these services creates a platform, owns that platform, and then when peers interact with each other, they extract value. And that means that the users are actually gaining value from other users, but that the value creation that they have is actually extracted basically by shareholders who own the platform. So what I'm very interested in is when you open up the data layer, so as in, Facebook has a siloed data set, Uber has a siloed data set, Airbnb has a siloed data set. What happens when you break open that data layer and it all exists in a blockchain? And instead of sort of signing up for these proprietary services, you could own a network token which gives you access to these sorts of services. So when you can kind of open source all of these networks and create very well-defined incentives, could you create a sort of decentralized Facebook or a decentralized Uber or decentralized Etsy? where instead of there being a centralized owner of the network which extracts value to shareholders, all of that network actually accrues back to the users of the network. So people who are right now participating on Twitter, say, and they have 500,000 followers, they may be monetizing that indirectly, right? It's not to say that that can't be monetized, but it's really happening off that Twitter protocol. They're not really actually making money by providing all this content and value for everyone, but they are providing value actually to Twitter's shareholders. So if in this idea of a tokenized world, the shareholders and the users are the same people. There's no differentiation there. So when you're an active user on the Twitter protocol instead of the Twitter centralized platform, value then accrues to the holders of, in this case, as an example, the Twitter coins, right? And the holders of the Twitter coins actually act as the shareholders of the decentralized protocol that everyone is participating in. The other thing that's fascinating about the system is that there's never been an incentive, like a selfish incentive, for people to create these things. There was very strong incentive for people to create Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr, and this has resulted in individual people accruing billions of dollars of value for themselves. Open source protocols have historically never sort of created a monetary incentive for the founder or creator, but for the first time ever, we are legitimately seeing hundreds of millions of dollars of personal wealth being accrued for the creators of very popular protocols like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I think this is a really important trend because people are now seeing this, they're seeing this wealth accrual, and it actually creates selfish and rational incentives to go out and create these decentralized protocols. If you can create a decentralized protocol that becomes a future infrastructure of the internet, that will accrue you billions of dollars of personal wealth, much in the way that being the creator of Facebook or Uber will. So for the first time, we sort of have this incentive, this clear economic incentive to actually create these networks, these extremely well-defined and precise incentive structures, which create sort of spontaneous self-organization around decentralized protocols. And instead of that being this centralized platform where there's actually like a selfish incentive to just own that platform. So the really powerful effect here of users owning the networks that they participate in is that they become fanatics about these networks. You know this by being here talking to people at this conference. People who love Bitcoin truly love Bitcoin. It's almost kind of scary. It's true though. I might love the service Uber. I might really love Twitter. But somehow Bitcoin, Ethereum, these things feel different, like viscerally. The people that participate in these platforms, it feels like there's it's not like I like it, it's like I love it, like people don't get tattoos, but like search Bitcoin tattoo on Google, right? It's pretty crazy. Maybe don't actually, but so this idea of user ownership of the networks that they participate in is really powerful. And it creates this sort of virality effect for those users, where Bitcoin really spread by this sort of organic word-of-mouth ownership. Every single person in the Bitcoin network has an equity stake in that Bitcoin peer-to-peer payment system, and they have a rational incentive to increase that user base of that system. So instead of there just being more traditional network effects that we might see around a service like Facebook or Twitter, whereby it becomes, the platform becomes more useful the more people that join the platform. So like if your friends are on Facebook, it's a better experience, right? Now it's like not only are your friends using Bitcoin so you can pay them, but because your friends are using Bitcoin, you're actually accruing value for yourself. So there's like a two-part network effect when users actually own the networks that they participate in. And I think this idea of user ownership is really, really powerful. And I think this is part of the reason that what we're seeing around tokenization has taken off so quickly. this idea of creating new digital assets which power very specific use cases. It creates a sense of ownership in that specific application, that specific use case, that specific network. Rather than simply using Bitcoin or Ether for every different type of network, you can create very specific incentives around one use case. So when you look at something like Filecoin or something like Golem, and these are decentralized file systems and decentralized compute systems, you can create very specific incentive systems for the users and founders around the success of that very specific piece of the stack. So instead of just betting broadly on the value of a system like Ethereum, they can actually bet very specifically on the decentralized file storage system that they either created or are participating in. The other thing that I think is really important about this token system is that it is all bootstrapped on speculation. And this is actually a good thing. It's a very important thing. The reason being that there needs to be liquid and very clear prices in order for these incentive structures to all make sense. So why would you mine Bitcoin if you can't sell your Bitcoin, basically? The Bitcoin network can't really take off like it did until there are liquid markets where you can buy and sell Bitcoin. That speculation and that clear price point and liquidity actually drives activity in the primary network. So that side speculation, which really has nothing to do with the activity on the blockchain, is very, very important. It's an incredibly key component of driving use of these decentralized protocols and these decentralized networks. Because there needs to be this liquid spot price for anyone to be able to kind of identify their incentives, identify their cost base. If you want to build the largest cloud computing cluster in the world, like Bitcoin, you need people to know how much money they should spend on hardware, right? And that comes from Bitcoin being at X price and me mining X Bitcoin per hour, and then I can get a well-defined kind of business going. And without that very clear incentive structure, or without the very clear pricing, those incentive structures are much less clear. So I actually think that the rampant speculation that we're seeing around early stage digital assets and early stage tokens is actually extremely important because it creates really well-defined and liquid prices so that these networks can launch and really gain momentum because there's a clear price point for the digital assets which are powering these networks. So this kind of speculating early stage on these digital assets, this is what Polychain, my fund, is focused on doing. It's finding these digital assets which we believe may become the core incentive unit for future architecture, for the future architecture of the internet, and investing at a very early stage in that with the intention of holding it for a very long time. By doing this, we can actually support the price point and support the liquidity in the markets which define the dollar value of these individual tokens or units of these networks. And by doing that, we help these networks get off the ground faster and actually basically get, become mainstream faster. It may sound sort of crazy now, but I really do think that the first one of these user-facing networks that takes off will take off very, very quickly. The first sort of Twitter coin that can actually incentivize you monetarily to gain followers, to get retweets, this is going to take off very, very quickly. And these design of these incentive structures are much more complicated than the design of the incentive structures in Bitcoin. But I do believe it is possible. And I think we're seeing a lot of really interesting experimentation and speculation at the fringe of this entire space right now. So with that, I think I like to call this this larger idea of tokenization around these decentralized internet protocols, the second business model of the internet. As you heard me say, this first business model, what was so successful about it was actually just the constant ability to extract value from these networks that have very powerful network effects between the users. Facebook being a case in point kind of example. I think the second business model of the internet is essentially a protocol designer coming up with a system which specifies these very clear incentives, keeping some percent of the network for themselves, much like they might keep a percentage of equity in their company for themselves, and then launching this decentralized protocol. And if they design the incentives correctly, watching it organically grow because every user in the system is incentivized to use the system. And I think that this business, it's not exactly a business model, that this is going to be the second major megatrend which creates value on the internet, with the first one being this idea of owning the platform or network. The second one will be tokenization of the platform or network, and the value accruing to those token holders, which are the users and the shareholders all at once. So with that, my final statement here is that Polychain is hiring. And if you'd like to join us in investing in many of these early stage projects, please let me know and come up to me afterwards. Thank you all very much.